Good evening, everyone. It is time for this week midweek medicine. My name is Lamar, Toulouse, coming to you from Success Life Church Fellowship, where our aim is to get you to live your success life when? Now. Come on, let's dive into this week's midweek medicine. As you know, we have started a new format on these Wednesday night medicine messages where we want to give you kingdom principles to help navigate through life's obstacles. As you face the trials, as you face circumstances and situations in your life, we're going to dive into some biblical principles to help you navigate through these life obstacles. Where if you're going through a storm, the storm won't be going through you. So come on, let's dive into this week's message. I'm going to start, and this is going to be a two-part message here for these next two Wednesday nights. And we'll break it down in two parts so we can get through it all. So let's dive into the first part of today's message as we talk about kingdom principles to help deal with life's obstacles. The foundation passage from the message that we've been preaching here. And this is what I want us to understand, that God has come to give Christ came to give us life, and that we may have that life more abundantly. And if you have been asking yourself, how can I have lived my life more abundantly? It's not about the outer, but more so the inner. How my inner life matches when what's going on the inside of me is good, then what goes on around me falls in place. So let's dive into today's message. We're going to be talking from this topic here of how to cope with things. Let's talk about this for the next two messages, how to cope with things. And then now we want to be more specific in coping through Christ. How do I cope with the situations that I'm going through? Okay, we all face circumstances. We all face situations. We all have trials and tribulations that we're going through. But you can have one person going through it one way and another person going through the same thing but come out with different results. Why is that? Because we cope with things differently. So I want to deal in these next two messages on from this topic, coping through Christ. So let's look at now as I get into the message here. And when I was growing up, or if you may know, there's a movie called The Lion King. And in The Lion King, it's a movie for kids, but so much principle in that movie and helping understand with and dealing with things that we go through in life. And as you know, Mufasa, the king at the time, and Simba, his son, who was to take over as king, Mufasa was killed, and now Simba found himself being blamed for his father's death when it was not him that did it, but evil one, Scar, who came and did it because he wanted to take over the throne. Doesn't that sound like the enemy who wanted to be God, who wanted to take over, and now he comes to steal, kill, and to destroy? So Scar gets into Simba's head to get him to run away and never come back, leaving his purpose and his plan that he would have as the inheritor of the throne. And so now he leaves, and the point of the story that I'm getting to is he finds these two friends that gives him this phrase, Hakuna Matata. It means no worries. And it's a framework to go through life, just saying that Hakuna Matata, it means no worries, that I'm not going to have trials in life, I'm not going to have circumstances and situations, I'm going to just breeze through it. But we know that is not how life ends up when you're going through things. But you can go through the things without the worry and without the pain of having to worry. But what he realized is when his Nala, I believe it was, found him to get him to come back to the place that he was supposed to rule and reign in the in the footsteps of Mufasa. Now I'm getting back and coming to the realization that I can't run from my purpose. I have to run back to it and take hold of the position that I was born and raised for, so I can be now the king of the throne to lead the people in the way that is right, as opposed to what Scar was trying to accomplish. So if you know the movie or you know the story, you have to ask yourself the same question, just as Simba asked. Am I going to run from the situation, or am I going to run to the situation and face it? So let's deal with this principle here. You're going to either try to escape, or you're going to face it. You're going to escape it, or are you going to face it? Because just as it says in Job, the 14th chapter, verse 1, a man is but few days and full of trouble. We are going to go through things. Man that is born of a woman is of few days and full of trouble. We're born into trials. We're born into tribulation. We're born into a fallen world. Until Christ comes back and redeem us, we live now in a struggle. There's a wrestling that is taking place. There's a fight that's taking place on the inside. And now as I'm dealing with this and I go through certain situations and certain trials, now I find myself dealing with this in a way and asking myself, how am I going to cope with this? How am I coping with the trial that I'm going through? Why some folks see it as I'm coming out stronger and others see it as defeat. Some come out better and some come out bitter. You have to ask yourself the question, which one are you going to be? Am I coming out of this better, or am I going to come out of it bitter? But you make the choice and you make the decision. So that question poses another question. As you're going through the situations and circumstances that you're facing, who are you becoming? Look at the word here, to be. Who am I? Who am I becoming through this circumstance that I'm dealing with? Who am I becoming if I've lost my job, or if I'm going through financial struggle? Am I dealing with health issues? Am I dealing with relationships? So I've been backstabbed. I've been backbitten. I'm ridiculed. There's betrayal in my midst. Who am I becoming because of that? I become bitter because of those situations, or I become better. As the saying goes, what don't kill you makes you what? Stronger. So if it makes you stronger, you know this thing hasn't come to destroy me. It has come to push me or to propel me to a higher place so that I can become better. Or you're going to become bitter. And look, if you know of anyone who have become bitter, and you live with that person, or you have to work with that person, or you're around that person, you know it'll bring your whole day down. It's just a negative atmosphere. It's negative energy around that person, or if you are that person. But guess what? You can turn the tables at any time when you learn how to cope with things, but you have to cope with it through Christ, because he gives us the strength to get through anything that we're dealing with. So I asked myself, who am I becoming in this situation? So when and knowing that, you see in between, okay, am I becoming better or am I becoming bitter? Let's go to the next question to ask ourselves. As we would all see when you're dealing with storms and when you're dealing with circumstances and situations. The next thing that I have to deal with is, what is my go-to? How do I cope with? Or how do you cope with it? Or what is your go-to? We all have a go-to when we're dealing with pressures, when we're dealing with things that have come and agitate your world and shake up your situation. What's your go-to? Some people's go-to is drugs. Some people's go-to is alcohol. Some people's go-to is bad relationships. Some people go-to is to make them stronger. They face challenges. They don't look at the challenge as a problem. They look at it as an opportunity. So we have a contrast between two individuals. I would say a mindset, a way of thinking of what you're leaning to. But now you in understanding this through Christ as our coping mechanism, or the one that gives me the strength on the inside to cope, I find myself now having to cope two different ways. Am I leaning to the flesh or am I leaning to the spirit? So that gives me the next question is, I know what my go-to is, but your go-to is more so what you're leaning toward. So if you find yourself leaning toward the flesh, that's when you know I have to have a wake-up call, because if I lean to my flesh, I'm going to find myself an emotional wreck. I'm going to find myself dealing with this situation emotionally. I'm going to find myself trying to find emotional people to huddle around me to deal with this, because I'm looking for someone to agree with me instead of someone that's going to push me to get me better. Sometimes when you're going through things, you want that comfort. You want that appealing to the flesh. Woe is me, it's just so hard out here, and we ain't going to get through this. And it feels good when you're having that conversation with others who are dealing with things, who don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But when you find someone that is not going to allow you to have the pity party, but want you to have a power party, they're trying to infuse you with the Spirit of Christ that's in you to get you to press toward the mark for the prize. It is the person that's going to tell you, you got to put those old things behind you and look toward the prize. The prize is what you come into, not what you came from. The prize is who you're going to become, not who you are. You may have been ostracized, or you may have been ridiculed, or you may have dealt with issues in the past, but you can put those to the side to become better. But you have to make the choice. In coping, it's the choice that you make that will push you forward or pull you back. Come on, let me say that again. In coping with things, it's the choice that you make in the coping that will either push you forward or pull you back. So think about that in the principle that we're dealing with here. If you feel yourself going back, change the choices that you're making, because you're making choices based in your flesh as opposed to your spirit. Because the flesh is weak, the spirit is willing, but it's a fight going on the inside of you, where you can't do the thing that you would do, and the thing that you don't want to do, you find yourself doing. You're leaning to the wrong understanding. Come on. What you're leaning towards, or who you're leaning towards. So let's look at Proverbs, the 3rd chapter, verse 5 to prove this out. Proverbs, the 3rd chapter, verse 5, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. See, when we're coping with things, it's the, how should I say this? It's the health of our heart determines how we cope with the trials and the tribulations that we come across. And it will get me the result of better, or it will get me the result of bitter. Because if you're operating out of a bitter heart, it's going to be hard to trust in the Lord. So I will find a lot of folks that have discredited God. They have gone away from Jesus Christ because of circumstances and situations that happened in their lives. That things may have been unfair, or a loved one was taken from them earlier than they would like, or you don't understand the things that's happening, and why is this happening to me? Why am I going through these things? And so you become hard-hearted, and you become bitter in heart, and therefore when you're bitter, it's hard for you to trust in someone outside of you, in a realm that you have to tap into that you may not understand. And now you find yourself trying to make understanding of something at times there is no way you can understand. So it says to trust in the Lord with all your heart, though. I know this is difficult that I'm going through, but I'm going to trust God in it. I know I'm faced with these obstacles, but I'm going to trust God in it. And in trusting him, he says, How do I trust in him with all my heart? Not by leaning not to my own understanding. So if I'm leaning to trying to understand this when it doesn't make sense, then I'm going to find myself worried. I'm going to find myself full of anxiety. I'm going to find myself going the opposite direction than the direction with the answer. So I have to lean not to my own understanding. When watch verse 6. It says, but in all my ways acknowledge him, and now he will direct my path. So in coping with this, I have to take this thing to God to see what he would give me instructions on and how to deal with this thing. So you may have been trying to deal with it on your own and going through different sources trying to help you deal with it. But now we need to go to the source that have created us and see what he has to say in the matter. So the point that I'm making here is, number one, we have to bring it to God when? First. Before any other person you go to, before any other thing you go to, bring it to God first. Come on, if you don't get nothing else out of this midweek medicine, get that. Bring it to God first. Seek ye first, it says, Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, God's way of doing things. How would God intervene into this situation and make my path straight? If I'm going to trust in the Lord with all my heart, if I'm going to lean not to my own understanding, if in all my ways I'm going to acknowledge him and he's going to direct my path, I have to first bring it to him. So a passage that we have to use now in doing this is Philippians, the 4th chapter, starting at verse 6. He says, don't be anxious for nothing. Be careful for nothing. Anything that you're going through, any situation, any circumstance, don't be anxious about it. But in everything, by prayer and supplication, watch this, with thanksgiving, let your request be made known unto God. Bring it to God first. Let your request be made known unto God. God knows everything, but he wants you to come to him because he is the authority on the situation. And you go to an authority with thanksgiving because he is faithful and has the power to intervene into your situation. So you have to come to him with prayer and petitioning, meaning you have to make your request specifically known unto God. What do you want to happen in this situation? And bring it to the throne of God, and he will give you grace to help in your time of need. So, first point that we want to get out of this is make your requests known unto God. Bring it to God. Bring it to him. Now, the second one that we want to deal with in this, and we'll stop on this one and pick up on it in part 2. But number 2 is when you bring it to God, leave it with God. Come on, type it in the comments, say it out loud, write it down on your paper. 1, bring it to God. 2, leave it with God. So many times through this ministry, through ministering and praying for people and praying with people, we would always come up for prayer, receive that prayer, shout and have a joyful time. But as soon as we leave the altar, or as soon as we leave the church, or as soon as we leave the place that we gathered in, we take our issue back with us. We take the problem back with us. You have to, see, this is how I know if you left the problem or kept the problem. If you left the problem, you're resting in him because he's faithful to perform what he promised. If you kept the problem, you still talking about, Lord, do it for me. Lord, can you please? Lord, will you? And you're talking with this one and you're talking with that one. And so now the mindset of a person who left it with him and the mindset of the person who kept it with them, you can see it in their response. And it's through how they're responding verbally lets me know if they left it. Because if you left it with God, you don't have no more care about it. you're not worrying about it anymore. You left it with him, and it is done, and you are no longer worried about that thing anymore. So first, you have to bring it to him, and secondly, you have to leave it with God. Amen. Come on, we're going to pick up on part 2 of this in the next message, because I want to break it down in 2 parts. Go back, take these scripture passages, take these 2 points, and meditate on them. The takeaway of this message is you have to know that God is with us, and he is faithful and just to perform what he promised. And the action plan that I want us to get from here is to leave it. Practice resting in God. It's a discipline. Not to worry, but to let it be with him, because he got it in his hand. Well, God bless you. This has been our segment for this midweek message. Part 2 coming up next week. Tune in. Get you a piece of paper. Write these principles down. This is food for thought, food for the soul, for you to meditate on day and night. God bless you. You have an awesome rest of your